So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Peter, for the opportunity to present the content of the Q&A just after it has been published on the EMA website. Next slide, please. So it's a document which has been developed jointly with the member states and in consultation with the Commission. It covers the centrally authorized products, but also nationally authorized products. This includes also the mutual recognition procedure on decentralized procedure. The aim is to provide practical aspects to complement the Commission Q&A, and it will be a living document. Next slide, please. So in the next slide of my presentation, I will highlight the main aspects of the topics that has been covered in the Q&A. Next slide, please. Regarding the GVP modules, so as set out in the legislation, it will be replaced by the volume 9 will be replaced by the GVP modules in the future. So until the transitional period, if there is any on some requirements of the new legislation is over, or until the GVP modules are published as final, the volume 9A will remain applicable. Next slide. Regarding the pharmacovigilance system master file, on its summary, the marketing authorization holder will have, as of July, to move from the detailed description of the pharmacovigilance system in the marketing authorization application to the pharmacovigilance system master file, which will no longer be in the marketing authorization application. However, just a summary of the pharmacovigilance system will need to be provided in the dossier. So on this, the summary of the pharmacovigilance system is detailed in the legislation, and it could be provided under the module 181 as a single statement that will need to be signed by the applicant on the QPPV. Next slide. When the pharmacovigilance system summary will have to be introduced. The legislation set out some mandatory deadline. So any new marketing authorization that will be submitted after July will need to contain this summary, as well as any renewal, that will be submitted also as of July. So it could concern a 5th-year renewal, but also an annual renewal for a conditional marketing authorization. Any ongoing application, so new initial application or renewal that will be ongoing as of July, will not be required to be upgraded to the new requirement. So it will then follow the transition period also like for the other existing marketing authorization. Next slide. So for the existing marketing authorization, this will have to be introduced over a period going to July 2015. There's a mandatory deadline in the legislation, so either at the time of a renewal or at the latest by July 2015. However, there will be some option for the marketing authorization holder to introduce on a voluntary basis the summary earlier, in that case through a variation, provided the master file that remain on site could fully comply with the implementing measure that will be published by the Commission, and the details which are provided will be provided in the final GVP module. On these requirements to have a summary will apply to all marketing authorization which contain a DDPS or which do not contain a DDPS. Next slide. Which variation to introduce the summary? It is anticipated that it will be an immediate type 1A variation immediate notification, which will be reflected in the update of the variation guideline. But until the guideline is published, there could be an Article 5 recommendation to provide this framework, and it is expected that the member states will trigger such a procedure by July 2012 this year. And then we had the question whether it's possible to submit a one-off group variation across the centrally authorized product and the MRP on the nationally authorized product, and it's not possible to have just one procedure. They will need to follow the current rules for grouping of type 1A variation. So guidance could be seen on the DMA website or on the CMDH website for this. Next slide, please. The risk management plan. When it's a new requirement that systematically any new application that will be submitted after July contain a risk management plan, and this also will apply to generics. The same as for the pharmacovigilance system master file, there will be no obligation for the pending marketing authorization application to upgrade with their RMP those not having one, unless this is requested by the authority for safety concerns. Next slide. Which format for the risk management plan? It is anticipated that there will be a 6-month transitional period. However, this is still under discussion with the Commission and Member States, and if this will be confirmed, it will be reflected in the Commission implementing regulation. So assuming there will be a transitional period, it will mean that it will be possible to submit either according to the old or to the new format, having also in mind that the RMP template will be updated and will be published around September. In addition, the authorities will have to publish a risk management plan summary for all existing also for the existing marketing authorization. So it is expected that gradually the marketing authorization holder will have to move to the new format in order for the authorities to be able to publish this summary, and some guidelines on timelines for doing this move will be provided when we publish the updated RMP template. Next slide. Regarding the herbals and homeopathics, we would like just to clarify that for the traditional herbals, just the requirements to have a pharmacovigilance system master file apply. There's no obligation to submit a summary nor a risk management plan. And for the homeopathics products following the simplified registration procedure, none of the requirements will have to apply. However, all other herbal homeopathics products not having followed those procedures will have to follow the new requirements. Next slide. For the post-authorization safety studies, after July, new post-authorization safety studies imposed to existing or to new marketing authorization, and that will be a condition to the marketing authorization because it affects the benefit-risk balance of the products, will be reflected in the risk management plan. And for the centrally authorized products, it will also be reflected in the Annex 2. And it is expected that for the nationally authorized product, it will be reflected in the national decision. For joint studies, in addition, they could be to have similar protocol. Some key elements within a core protocol may become a condition to the marketing authorization. This new PAS study, which have been put as a condition to the marketing authorization, will follow the new procedure which will require the involvement of the PRAC. And in addition, for transparency purposes, these studies will have to be registered in the NCEP database. Next slide. For the PSUR, as of July, there will be some various procedures in place to assess PSUR that will be submitted to the authorities. For centrally authorized products, whether it's one or several caps submitted at the same time, there will be the new procedure in place involving the PRAC. For nationally authorized products and centrally authorized products containing the same active substance, the new single assessment procedure will not start before the URD list becomes binding. And where it's concerned only nationally authorized product containing the same active substance, the EMA will not start as of July this year the single assessment procedure. However, the work sharing which is currently in place will continue. And for purely nationally authorized products, it will remain the competent authority concerned that will assess the PSUR. Next slide. Regarding the content and the format of the PSUR, the same is expected that there will be also a transitional period of 6 months. And in that case, there could be old format for the PSUR and also PSUR submitted according to the new format. It will imply that those submitted according to the old format will contain the line listing, but on top of it will need to provide a benefit-risk evaluation. For the one following the new format, no line listing should be provided, and the benefit-risk evaluation will be integrated in the content of the PSUR. Regarding the rules for the submission after the data lock point, it will follow the new rules which has been set out in the GVP model, so either 70 or 90 days. And for the requirement for the submission, so for the central authorized products, it will be still the ECTD format, and for the national competent authority, an updated table has been published also just at the same time, which provide some requirement and update of the requirements for the national competent authority. So either for the centrally authorized product or nationally authorized product. Next slide. Regarding the PSUR requirements, in the legislation there's a derogation for certain products, the generics, traditional herbals, homeopathics, and well-established use products. So for those products, there's no obligation, there will no longer be obligation to submit a PSUR unless the marketing authorization contains a condition or this has been requested by the competent authority. And this kind of request by the authority will be also reflected in the future in the URD list. If products are not being authorized according to these legal bases which are listed in the legislation, they will still be under the obligation, marketing authorization holder will still have the obligation to submit PSUR. Next slide. The URD list is expected to be published in October and will come into force 6 months after, so around April 2013. Until that time, the generics which contain a statement in the marketing authorization that they have to submit PSUR according to the reference medicinal products, this will no longer be regarded by the authority as a condition, so meaning that there's no longer obligation to submit a PSUR. But on the reverse, the one having a statement where it deviates from the reference medicinal products, they have to continue to submit PSUR accordingly to what is stated in the marketing authorization. And where there's also a statement in the marketing authorization that will be contradictory to what will be mentioned in the URD list, marketing authorization holder will have to align the marketing authorization likely through a variation. Next slide. The product information is also affected by the new legislation, and a black symbol will need to be included with some specific statement. And in addition, for all marketing authorization, standard statement for encouraging the reporting of adverse drug reaction by patients and healthcare professionals will need to be included. So for the black symbol, it will only concern those which are going to be subject to additional monitoring, and it will result for all these changes to the product information in an update of the QRD templates, which are not expected to be published before the symbol has been selected by the Commission. And this cannot be done before the PRAC provides a recommendation on a possible symbol. So the QRD templates, when they will be published, will be provided also, we provide some guidance for the implementation and for the introduction of the black symbol. And until we are publishing the update of the QRD templates, we understand that the marketing authorization holder will continue to use the current one. Next slide. At the time, also when we have published the Q&A, we have provided a table compiling information about national requirements for the reporting of individual case report for serious cases outside the EU and for non-serious cases within the EU. Next slide. For the renewal, we are going to publish the final update of the renewal guideline in June, And as of July, marketing authorization holder will have to submit renewal application according to the new requirement, which will mean that no longer PSUR should be submitted, nor PSUR addendum, nor line listing. However, we will need to have relevant information in the clinical overview in order to be able to assess the risk-benefit balance of the medicinal products. There is some understanding amongst the authority that there could be a certain flexibility for the first months, provided that all the relevance are provided in the clinical overview. We could understand that sometimes the structure is not exactly the one that will be provided at the beginning in the guideline for the clinical overview. But as the months are going to pass, we are expecting that then the guideline will be followed strictly. On the next slide. So as it's just a living document, we are expecting to have some updates in the future, and there might be also, as the implementation of the legislation evolves, there might be more queries. So we have set up a mailbox to collect the question. You should not expect any individual responses to the questions which are going to be provided to this mailbox. However, it will form the basis for an update of the Q&A, and we expect to have the next one in July. So, next slide, and that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Christelle. Can I encourage you to sit next to Florian? Because as a team, you're probably better sitting next to each other. Christelle, thank you very much indeed for that very clear presentation. Some of the issues presented are quite complex, and I think you managed to cut through some of that complexity, so that was really helpful. Just to announce that we do have a multiple choice test at the end of the afternoon to make sure that you've got all of that, okay? Because having tortured us with your what if questions, we're now going to talk, no, only joking. So we are willing to take questions either to be answered, because it may be that we have the answers, or to be noted, because we can always then take them offline. You'll notice, for example, that we had at the last stakeholder forum the questions about the applicability to homeopathics, simplified registration of homeopathics and herbals, and we've answered them today. So we obviously do listen, at least most of the time. So any questions or comments to Christelle or colleagues, please go ahead.
Isabel Clamou, FPA. Just to come back maybe on slide 17 about the black symbol, because I think I was getting a bit confused, because we just went through the consultation on the revision of the QRD template, whereby industry and all the stakeholders contributed, where we were asked for our views or ideas or perspective about the future symbol. And now we hear that maybe the decision will be taken afterwards. So how the results to the consultation would be considered by, because it would be the Commission and the PRAC making the decision. So how the two things work together?
Mick, do you want to preface your presentation by giving a little insight into that? No, but why not?
Well, it's going to be covered in the last session of the day. Not all the answers are available yet, but maybe we can park that question until the last session.
Yeah. Okay. Other questions? Please, go ahead.
Angelika Jos, Europa Bio. If I have seen correctly, there is still uncertainty about the transitional period for PSUR and our new RMPs or something. So and that decision will only be taken in July, and if it's negative, there's no transition, it will be expected that the next day submissions will be in the new format. How is that going to work out?
Florian, you need to have a crystal ball. I know you didn't have one this morning, but maybe you found a crystal ball over lunch, because I've got a feeling that this all will become clearer on Tuesday the 29th, won't it, Florian?
The reason why we are a bit prudent here in the wording is not to preempt the standing committee on next Tuesday. The Commission is proposing a 6 months transitional period to the standing committee, but we have to see whether it is in the end endorsed in all aspects by member state. We are confident that there will be a transition period covering most of the items, but whether one or the other issue may be still subject to discussion on Tuesday, we cannot really exclude. And Therefore, we advise to have a bit of prudent wording here, not to create false expectations, even if we hope or we are suggesting this 6 months period as the best solution.
And if I understood from your presentation this morning, assuming a positive vote next Tuesday, there should be publication of the draft final implementing measures within a couple of weeks. So the industry will be able to scrutinise the text within a couple of weeks, yes? Okay. Further questions or comments, either to be answered or to be listened to? Please, go ahead, sir.
Johan Elmer, Europa Bio. Regarding the PSUR list open for consultation now, it's noticed that the existing harmonized birth dates on the present work-sharing harmonization list has been changed, moving now to the new list. I'm wondering for the reason for that and how practical that is. And related to that, of course, the harmonization from a global perspective of birth dates, which I would assume are perhaps harmonized to the existing list, but will then perhaps deviate moving into the new one. So some words of explanation. Thank you.
Okay. Rodrigo, do you want to do this or do you want me to do this? You want me to do it? Okay. Rodrigo Postigo was the EMA co-rapporteur for the GVP module on PSUR, so I just take the opportunity to introduce him right at the back. You're right. Some of the submission data lock and submission dates in the draft EURD list that has been published have changed compared to the work showing list. I think the way to answer this is to explain the methodology used to come up with these lists. Well, there are 2 points. One, to review what the legislation says, and then to talk about the methodology we've used. So basically, the legislation is wonderfully complex on PSUR submission and gives 4 different ways at which submission can be fixed. Either default submission for innovator products, or it's a condition of the marketing authorization, or it's a member state request, or it's on the EURD list, this binding list adopted by the European Medicines Agency. And because of that complexity, we've had to try and cut through that. Now, the legislation does foresee the opportunity for industry to make requests to change submission dates based on either health issues or international harmonization. The idea of this public consultation now is to try and preempt you requesting changes after we've published it as final. And the reason for that is that one company will request a change, but if the substance is in more than one medicinal product, it might suit one company to have a change and then cause trouble for another company. So now is the time to respond. Now, so that's background. In terms of how we drew up the lists, we have, based on legal advice, had to make every effort to take on board the member state authority as the competent authority for nationally authorized products, where they have this right to request a PSUR at any time. So we started with the work sharing lists. There's the work sharing list on the one hand, there's the synchronized birth date list on the other, there's the centrally authorized product list on the other hand. We're running out of hands here, but you can see where we're coming from. And finally, the Eudivigilance Medicinal Product Dictionary. It was all put together, and then we went through repeated rounds of consultation with the member states saying, do you think we can reduce the frequency? Do you think, well, usually it was about reducing the frequency actually, to try and make the number of submissions manageable, bearing in mind that the outputs, certainly for single assessment through the PRAC, will be legally binding. Therefore, we need to be really sure that the outputs are very, very, very robust, because they're going to lead to labelling changes potentially. So just because of the process of going through rounds of consultation with the member states, inevitably member states have done, in some cases, a risk assessment. In some cases, they've looked what might suit them at a member state level, and they've made suggestions which we've automatically taken on board. And that means for some of the substances, it changes the submission dates compared to the EURD list. That was a long but accurate answer to your question, and hopefully clear.
Thank you.
So take the opportunity, if you would like, to propose changes to the submission dates, because now is a very good opportunity by, I think, the 4th of June. Further questions or comments? Christelle, that must have meant that both in the written document and in the presentation, it was very clear. So the other thing to emphasise is take the opportunity of sending in questions. I mean, obviously, read and digest the answers that we've already put out so that you don't, if you like, recycle the same questions. But if you do have further questions, put them in through that mailbox and we'll try and answer them with an updated Q&A, if necessary, in July. It'll depend how many we receive.